fire first became visible to watchers along the ridge line of the building's west wing. The blaze traveled east to the upper ridges of the towered central section of the building. In all, it was estimated that 60% of the building received extensive damage, and yet much remains.
This week on Tracing the Past, we look into the Administration Building fire of 1979 at Northwest Missouri State University. On July 24th, administration, teachers, and townspeople saw one of the most prominent buildings on campus go up in smoke and flames. 60% of the building was destroyed.
They were remodeling the administration building once again, a constant project, and they were almost finished. But that afternoon, they were trying to install the fire alarms, and the fire alarms kept going off, and they couldn't find where the short was. Well, actually, it wasn't a short, it was just sniffing a little bit of smoke, which we didn't catch till later that evening, and by then the fire had started above the west end, above the TV and radio studios in the administration building. And the fire spread up through the attic and over, and it's amazing the number of people that came out, and even while the building's on fire, carrying out filing cabinets and files and books and salvaging all kinds of records from the university. Nothing could basically be salvaged out of the radio TV studios because that's where the fire started.
I got a call from the operator on duty. He was very serious, and he said something like, "Hear me." He got my attention. He says, "This is not a joke. We have a fire in the administration building. We have been asked to evacuate." The Maryville Fire Department did not have any snorkels and all to reach up high enough to get to the roof of that fire. My thoughts were, I wonder what they're going to do now.
Call came out, I was in town, and so I came directly to the scene because of, we had been in the construction phase there, and I knew where we'd been working, and I was a little worried about that. But anyhow, I come to find out it was on the 4th floor, and I went to the 4th floor and found heavy smoke in the hallway and in the ceiling area above the false ceiling. We pulled hand lines, and well, before that, I guess I ran all the way back downstairs and locked the elevator down in the basement area so nobody could get on the elevator and possibly get trapped because the elevator controls were all in the attic area.
I got up here, probably it was about, I would say 15 minutes after the fire call had gone to the city, and the fire engine was stuck in the mud. And people were pushing the fire engine, trying to get it going, and smoke was just pouring out from underneath the roof on the west side of the building. And I thought to myself, oh boy, we're in trouble, deep trouble.
I do remember the night of the administration building fire. I was 7 years old at that time, and my father was a volunteer firefighter, and we were accustomed to receiving fire calls in the middle of the night. And it just so happens that night in July of 1979, we received the phone call that there was a building on fire in Maryville, and my dad needed to go to that fire to help out. I remember it being something about the admin building fire. I do remember watching my father leave, and as he did, I noticed a glow in the sky, and it was off in the direction of Maryville. And even at 7 years old, I knew that if there was that large of a glow in the sky, it had to be a pretty large fire. And that's when I do remember staying up for most of the night, crying, wondering if my dad would actually come home.
Coverage of it, the lack of water, lack of manpower at the time. The slate shingles on the roof made it hard for the fire to ventilate. The extremely heavy glass windows that were in there made it hard to get any ventilation into the thing or water in from the outside. Everything had to be done from the inside. Several false ceilings really helped it out or something, because once it got up in those false ceilings, it's very hard to control or get to.
When we return to Tracing the Past, we'll look into what was lost in the fire and see the damage that remains to this day. Welcome back to Tracing the Past. Tonight, we are looking into the Administration Building fire of 1979. Many people suffered great personal loss that day, but for Dr. Theophil Ross, the loss was much more painful. The flames engulfed his office, including years of research on his doctoral dissertation.
I was in the process of creating the final version, or draft, at that time. But so I had actually a draft of it in shape, and that's what I was working on. It wasn't complete, but I did have a draft that I had, as I said, taken home with me. So I didn't lose that part of it. Now, all the research notes and materials, I had done a lot of audio taping, oral history kind of stuff, and had photocopied a lot of things from the archives and the Library of Congress and those kinds of things. All of that was in the office, all of my notes, so that was all lost. Of course, everything that was in my office, I was completely wiped out. So not only was the dissertation material lost, but virtually everything that I had collected over the years, my entire professional career, my library, and personal things.
Looking at it from the outside, few would know that the fourth floor remains an imprint of the damage done that day. The charred and broken bricks, pipes, and beams almost serve as a memorial to everything lost in the fire. Blocked from public use, it is now used as a storage facility.
I found as many students as I could find, and we met at my house at 10:30. And I told one of the students, a very good reporter, that I wanted her to go cover the fire because I didn't want to be the only radio station in the country that didn't have the story on the air the next morning. And the phone started ringing, and we had alumni from radio stations calling from St. Joseph wanting to know if there's anything they could do for us. One of the stations, KKJO, I said, well, do you have a remote board that we could borrow? And the student said yes, and I said, well, we'll come and get it. So I sent 2 students to St. Joe to get the remote board. I sent other students out to get records and tapes and whatever it was that we were going to need the next morning. I called a friend of mine who's a contractor and asked him if, because I knew he had an old trailer that he had loaned to KNIM a couple of years earlier when they had a fire. And I called him to see if that trailer was available, and he said yes. And he hooked up his truck and went out and got the trailer and pulled it out to the transmitter, and we had carpenters and electricians and people from the telephone company, and the Associated Press sent a teletype machine up on a bus, and next morning we had a young lady that signed KXCV back on the air.
Thanks to, at that time, the director, Raleigh Stallman, you hardly would have known that we had a fire, in the respect that turn on the radio next morning and the radio station was on the air. He rushed around and borrowed equipment. I think started in a dorm room the next day, but we kept on going. And basically the same thing could be said about all the administrative offices. Yes, we had a fire. It was devastating. It took a lot of records, but you know, classes met the next morning. The president's office was up and running. Sometimes for the next month or two you had to ask, where's the president's office today? Where's the registrar today? But we kept on operating. We didn't let it get us down. And classes were not missed because of that fire. It's taken a long while to get the money to totally recover, but because of a number of people that were willing to give time and effort, we have the admin building back, now on the National Register of Historic Places, looking basically as it did when it was finished in 1910. And that is basically a tribute to a lot of people doing a lot of volunteer work, along with the administration being very careful about the funding and going at it very slowly, step by step. So it may have taken 30 years to totally complete the project. It's done, and the administration is up and running full blast again.
The Administration Building fire of 1979 marks a pivotal point in Northwest Missouri State University's history. A mere 12 hours after the fire destroyed 60% of the building, President Owens rallied the faculty and staff, saying, "As of 8 o'clock this morning, it's business as usual." They would go on to reconstruct most of the building, and along with the reconstruction came a new library and auditorium. Next week, we'll investigate the paranormal history of Northwest Missouri State University. Stay tuned for After Dark Arcade.